Story 1. Jimmy and Emily have been together for 5 years. The husband had recently been promoted. He worked a lot of hours and often went on small business trips. The wife did not like the fact that they spent so little time together. Yes, these trips paid good money for their town, but what kind of attitude was it when the spouses spent most of their time apart? She really missed her husband's attention, and sometimes he was so tired that he was exhausted. There was no time to talk about life and how anyone's day was going. Around this time, Emily had a new co-worker Alex at work, a young man full of strength and energy. Immediately, he began to show interest in the woman. Not working or even friendly, she had already forgotten what it was like when a man wooed her, and she was pleased to receive such attention from him. But she did not allow herself too much with him. She was a married woman, after all. They talked and got to know each other for several months. Alex turned out to be a very interesting and deep person. They started to communicate more and more on social networks, and the subjects of their conversations became more and more personal and even intimate. Another business trip of the husband began. Emily was sitting at home on her day off and was frankly bored with nothing to do. She began to correspond with Alex, who always managed to cheer her up somehow. When she complained to him about the incredible boredom, he invited her to go together to the movies, just in the rental of an interesting comedy that should cheer her up. "Shall we go?" he asked her. The woman didn't answer his message for a long time, thinking how it would look from the outside. She's a married woman going to the movies with some other man. It seems kind of uncool, but they are being friendly. Glory just saves her from a dreary evening, and it's not a date at all. Justifying herself, Emily agreed to Alex's invitation. The man behaved like a gentleman during the whole meeting, not overstepping the boundaries of the permitted. After the movie, they walked around the park for a while, and then the man offered to take Emily home. It was getting late when they arrived at the right house. The man half-jokingly asked, would she like to invite him over for tea? She agreed out of hospitality, but that was her mistake. When the woman had already put the kettle on and started offering different kinds of tea to choose from, Alex spotted a bottle of wine on one of the shelves. To Yusha, it was such a wonderful evening. Let's end it on a good note and drink wine, he suggested. After a few glasses and not at all friendly conversation, the man began to shower the woman with compliments and even embrace her. He talked about how beautiful she was, how much he had fallen in love with her at first sight, and how much he had been looking forward to meeting her. At one point, Emily's heart even tingled. She missed these words from her husband, who was just gone for days at work. From the alcohol she drank and the words she heard, the woman melted, and after a short time, she stopped thinking about her husband and what she was doing that evening. Everything happened right in the couple's apartment. In the morning, Emily woke up and saw that she was not alone in bed and with horror grabbed her head. What she had done, how she could do this to her husband. She had been sitting in the kitchen for a long time staring at one point when Alex finally woke up and came to her. But instead of a kiss and a good morning, she unexpectedly heard that all last night Emily considered it a mistake. She was very sorry that all this had happened. You just tell your husband about it and go to my place, the man said, sincerely not understanding what could have changed overnight. No, I can't just go, please, she replied. For the next 2 weeks, Emily nullified all communication with her colleague. She felt terribly guilty before her husband and only now realized how good and dear he was to her. When Jimmy returned from a business trip, she just could not be happy with him. She became more attentive to her husband, constantly talking to him about her love. She decided that she would never admit to cheating on him. She knew that it would cause Jimmy incredible pain, but that was no longer for her to decide. One day, Emily came home from work and found her spouse in the kitchen. In front of him was a shot glass and a large stack of papers. Her wife immediately sensed something bad. Her heart began to beat anxiously. At first, she thought it might be work-related, but when she got closer, she saw that it was her printed correspondence with a colleague. And like the cherry on top of the cake, on the pile was a printed photo. On it was a half-naked Emily sleeping peacefully in bed, just the night she cheated on her spouse. The colleague could not bear such an attitude from Emily, so he decided to tell her husband everything. It is difficult to convey what Jimmy felt at that moment. When he saw a large envelope on the doorstep of his apartment, he was surprised. He was not expecting a parcel from anyone. He opened it with curiosity, but when he opened it, the first thing he took out was the printed photo of his wife. The ground almost fell out from under his feet. He quickly went into the kitchen, sat down at the table, and took out the entire contents of the envelope, and there were a considerable number of sheets. Already on the 3rd page, he could not read any further. He took a bottle of strong alcohol out of the cabinet. When he had already finished reading all the correspondence between his wife and her lover, she came home and found her husband there. He said practically nothing while his wife tried to explain herself and ask for forgiveness. It was as if Jimmy wasn't even listening to her, his mind was spinning with questions. Why? Why everything was like this? Only when his wife's inappropriate sobs became completely unbearable, he said in a very gloomy voice, "Pack your things and just leave now. I have nothing more to talk about." Emily fell silent and with a tearful face went to get her suitcase. For a few days, the man did not dry out and thought a lot about this situation. And then he realized that this way he did not help anything. The marriage was ruined, he was not ready to forgive his spouse now, and it is unlikely he ever will, so he filed for divorce. Sonia had enough sense not to claim what rightfully belonged to her. She generally carefully avoided the company of a cheating spouse. Jimmy did not take revenge on Emily, he considered revenge to be a miserable, unworthy waste of precious time. In any case, she was going to live with the fact that she was an unfaithful wife, and the relationship that haunted her was bound to come out, and who would need her with such a track record is a big question. A story from life: shared income. When I was still in my first year of college, in the summer I was sent to visit my Aunt Cheryl, my mother's sister, at her dacha. Although, as one friend of mine would put it, it was exactly a country house. To make a long story short, Cheryl Alves was a woman who was a pretty walker but very beautiful. Slender legs, thin waist, and no wrinkles at all. Well, Auntie was also a blonde with a short haircut, which I liked even more. When such a beautiful woman lived next to me, walking with peace of mind was not an option. I often heard stories about her taking strange men into her house. One day, I decided to take a steam bath in the evening. I flooded the sauna and immersed myself in my thoughts. After a few minutes, thoughts of plans for the future and attempts to solve the integral equation in my mind abhorred me. Suddenly, I started thinking about Aunt Cheryl and how good she looked. Fantasies took over. "What are you doing here?" Cheryl Alves' voice suddenly rang out. I opened my eyes and saw Cheryl Alves standing in the door of the bathhouse. I immediately blushed. "You were not taught to knock?" I asked in a trembling voice. "And I thought you were well-mannered," she answered quietly, slowly approaching me. "You know I'm not well-mannered either." I hesitated from such surprise. Cheryl Alves was looking at me carefully with some interest and I began to understand what she was up to. "And you are a very good-looking guy," she said, coming even closer. I immediately looked at my aunt with rounded eyes and wanted to shout something, but I decided it was better to trust her. The kiss alone made me shiver. Imagine how much I tensed up when we went on. It was scary, but then I calmed down and the process was going great. When it all stopped, my aunt got up, smiled and left, and I was still sitting on the bench not understanding what had just happened. It felt like a dream or a fleeting thought, but when over time it began to repeat itself over and over again, I realized that this was my most perfect reality. As the years passed, I grew older and saw my aunt much less often. There were new worries, jobs, and other girls. She was jealous of me, even though she had other men of her own. I did not understand what we should do next, whether there was a reasonable way out of this situation. After all, we could not be together, it is already clear. No one would understand us, and many would stop communicating with us. To go to a psychologist with this topic is not possible either. No one will call you normal. All in all, I am confused, and how things will work out in my life next, I do not know. Thank you for listening to the story to the end, and if you like it, please support us with a like, as well as subscribe to our channel. Write in the comments what you think about the story.